Disclaimer. This video contains music and video footage I do not own. Credits will be at the end of the video. This video is not intended for children under the age of 13, nor is my channel. The Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, states that nobody under the age of 13 should have, among other things, a YouTube account. Hello boyos, girlos, and non-binary genderlos, and welcome back to another Lost Media video. The Nintendo 64 is by far one of the most iconic gaming consoles of all time, and what's weird is that it had a failed add-on, and many games would be developed for. The Nintendo 64 disk drive, which I will be calling the 64DD from now on for brevity's sake, was this add-on. It suffered through development hell, had a disastrous launch in Japan, and never left it outside of one alleged American one. Today, I'm going to discuss some of the many games meant for this add-on. By far the most famous scrapped 64DD game I've already talked about or Zelda on this channel. It's segment 17 of 20 Lost Video Games and was featured in Updated Lost Media Volume 1, so you can watch those videos if you want to know more about that. If you can handle the bad mic quality of 20 Lost Video Games, though Updated Lost Media Volume 1 is entirely listenable. To sum it up, Zelda is the name of an expansion for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time intended to mix up dungeons upon repeat playthroughs, keep the world consistent throughout a playthrough, such as signs remaining destroyed for the rest of a playthrough when destroyed once, and various other features and miscellaneous additions. While some of it was used to make The Legend of Zelda Master Quest, the rest remained unused, with various fan-made mods being partially developed and then abandoned. During the 2021 Nintendo Giga Leak, various files were found which led to a fan-made patch for Ocarina of Time with all of the DD maps within it, showing various differences between and Master Quest. Earthbound 64 is an early build of Mother 3, which was intended for the 64DD. Over the game's 12-year development cycle, it was originally started not long after the release of Mother 2, known in the US as Earthbound, for the Super Famicom, before later being prepared for the Nintendo 64DD. Due to delays with the 64DD, the game was pushed to the Nintendo 64, and, due to this, the game had to be made in 3D, which none of the developers were familiar with, on top of severe memory constraints provided by the 64's ROM cartridges. It would continue like this, with a playable demo being featured at Space World 1999 being labeled Earthbound 64, which to this day is the name used to refer to this build by fans is to avoid confusion with Mother 3. The game was briefly cancelled in 2000 and later released in 2006 on the Game Boy Advance. Notably, the 3D graphics were phased out when the game was released, maintaining a style consistent with the other two Mother games. As for the whereabouts of the build, they are unknown, being speculated to be in the possession of Nintendo themselves, HAL Laboratories, or Brownie Brown, thanks to an interview with Brendan Sector, the sole foreign playtester for Mother 3's GBA port. Mother 3 composer Shogo Sakai has denied composing for the prototype, with many fans claiming to have copies, though providing no credible evidence of these claims. Mario Artist is a series of 8 games very similar to Mario Paint, all intended for the 64DD, of which 4 were released in Japan between 1999 and 2000. These were Mario Artist Paint Studio, Mario Artist Talent Studio, Mario Artist Communication Kit, and Mario Artist Polygon Studio. However, 4 games remain unreleased to this day. These are Mario Artist Game Maker, which would allow players to make, play, share, and save games for later, though this concept would later be reused for Super Mario Maker and its sequel. Mario Artist Graphical Message Maker is rather vague, though it is speculated that it would allow people to draw and send messages to other players. Mario Artist Sound Maker, which would presumably allow the players to edit sound effects in various ways, and Mario Artist Jockey Maker, which no one knows anything about. It is speculated that the communication kit would be used to communicate these creations, much like the other games before them. No screenshots or video footage have surfaced of these builds whatsoever. Super Mario RPG 2, also known as Super Mario Adventure in the US, is a sequel to Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, originally shown off at Space World 1997 as a game for the 64DD. With the original being developed by Squaresoft, now known as Square Enix, this game was developed by Intelligent Systems, known for their work on the Fire Emblem, WarioWare, Paper Mario, and Wars franchises. Due to rights issues with Squaresoft, the decision was made to rebrand the game as Paper Mario, and, due to the DD's failure, the game was instead made for the regular Nintendo 64. Interestingly, the game had always used two-dimensional sprites that would move in a 3D environment, which is different from Super Mario RPG's entirely 3D graphics. Footage from Space World as well as numerous screenshots utilizing Super Mario World sprites exist online, though no remnants of this old build have surfaced. Taking a break from Mario titles, our next entry is Rev Limit, a racing game meant for the 64DD. The game was notable for using real-life car models which were labeled in-game with chassis codes to avoid copyright infringement, as well as revolutionary features for the time such as dynamic lighting and weather systems. During development, the game switched to a 64DD launch title from a standard 64 release, with it also being intended to release on Sega's 64 ALEC arcade board. The game featured a variety of modes, with many fictional locations as maps with weather options that could be changed in the menu. The game was delayed numerous times before being cancelled cancelled after developer Sega suffered extreme financial constraints. In 2016, Kawara's game show announced that he had somehow acquired a 64 cartridge with a prototype of the 64 version on it, with him sharing video footage. The ROM has not been dumped, however, and with Sega closing its doors in 2008, it's unlikely it ever will. Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade is the sixth mainline entry in the Fire Emblem series, released on March 29, 2002 for the Game Boy Advance. The game is notable for sparking international interest in Fire Emblem, as Roy, its main character, appeared as a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Melee just 4 months prior. The game is known for its development hell, and it originally began as a title called Fire Emblem Maiden of Darkness, also known as Fire Emblem 64, intended for the 64 DD. After years of being postponed, development was restarted and turned into The Binding Blade. Thanks to the efforts of Fire Emblem fans, we can get a glimpse as to what Fire Emblem 64 may have been. According to the Genealogy of Holy War Super Tactics book, in an interview with Shozo Kaga, series creator, as to whether or not a title will be made for the 64 as of 1996, he said, "Although it's not been decided yet, if there is a next game, the level of strategy would be much higher, and I would also return to something that's easier to play. I don't want to lose what makes Fire Emblem stand out from other games. As for the story, I'd like to explore Arcania's world again, from before the start of Marth's adventures when he landed on Talus. Although enemies, I want to develop the stories of interesting characters like Carbus and Mikalis." The ideas Kaga mentioned would later be used for Fire Emblem Thracia 776 and Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, with Shigeru Miyamoto announcing the game for the first time in 1997, with him saying it would come out in the latter half of 1998 before the game was fully announced in September 1998 in various Japanese gaming magazines. Unfortunately, the game was postponed for being too ambitious of a title, as revealed in an interview with Kaga in January 1999, with the aforementioned Thracia 776 being the next Fire Emblem game to be made, with it releasing on the Super Famicom on September 1st, 1999. When asked about concepts for the game, Kaga wrote in the Fire Emblem Treasure Book, "After Genealogy the Holy War was completed, the theme of the next game was considered immediately. In fact, we had originally wanted to return to Arcania, the stage of mystery of the emblem. However, although we intended on this decision from the very beginning, during the preliminary preparations we realized it was too ambitious and difficult to do with the Super Famicom hardware. If possible, we'd like to do it for new hardware. As when we spoke previous, I would like to continue Arcania's saga, possibly a story related to Marth. Of course, we must wait until the proper environment comes. If the game can be made, to tell the truth, I'll have to think for a long time. I haven't actually thought much about it. Anyhow, if another game was made, I'd like to realize all of my designs." Not long before Thracia 776's release, on August 15, 1999, Kaga left Intelligent Systems, the developers of Fire Emblem, to form Team Enog, later developing Tearing Saga after legal issues with Nintendo. With this and various development problems, Fire Emblem 64 was cancelled officially on September 24, 2000. While Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade is still readily available through physical distribution, no builds of Fire Emblem 64 are known to still exist, with no gameplay footage or demos being shown either. Only a single screenshot and some concept art from the making of Fire Emblem 25th Anniversary Development Secrets Awakening and Fates still remain. Desert Island 64, also known as Super Real Island, is a survival simulation RPG meant for the 64 DD about the unnamed protagonist engaging in various tasks to craft a civilization on the island, with the game being described as a mix of platform, survival, and life simulation. The game is reportedly going to be very complex, with a food chain and evolution amongst the various flora and fauna the game had presented, which included flying insects, crabs, elephants, and a dog-llama hybrid. According to what little concept art we have, Desert Island 64 was first shown off at Space World in 1996, and was going to be shown at E3 that year, though the game's developer, Imagineer, had to cancel the game and another title called Quest 64 2 due to financial troubles. The only remnants are screenshots, concept art, and mentions in German magazine Nintendo Funvision. Cabbage is the codename given when an unnamed 64DD prototype. It was developed by Shigeru Miyamoto, Shigesato Itoi, and Tsunekazu Ishihara, without the supervision of Nintendo's president at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi. The gameplay of Cabbage was similar to virtual pet games, being compared to Tamagotchi by the magazines of the time. It would use the 64DD's internal clock, a revolutionary feature for the time, to keep the player's Cabbage's virtual world running while the console is off. The game was going to have the ability to use the Game Boy Transfer Pack to transfer the creature from the 64 to a Game Boy to take them on the go in an interactive basket game. At Space World 1997, Miyamoto gave more details about the game's features, with the player being able to give the Cabbage toys, slides, swings, and other such things. The team proposed using 64DD floppy disks to swap toys between players. Itoi, in an interview with 64 Dreams, said that HAL Laboratories' Satoru Iwata joined the development team of the game in order to help modernize it and help with the labor of designing the tools to make Cabbage. The game was intended to be shown at Space World 2000, though wasn't due to Itoi and Ishihara's preoccupation with projects like Mother 3 at the time. The game was formally cancelled by Miyamoto in 2006 after a lack of updates for a significant amount of time, with many features being used in the Nintendogs and Animal Crossing franchises later down the line. Due to Miyamoto's secrecy in showing graphics of Cabbage, no images, videos, concept art, or anything of the sort have been released, with only mentions in various magazines backing up its creation. Junguru Taite 64, also known in English as Kimba the White Lion 64 or Emperor of the Jungle, is a tie-in game to the manga and anime Kimba the White Lion to be created for the 64DD by Shigeru Miyamoto and the son of mangaka Osamu Tezuka Makoto. The game would have been similar to the 3D Zelda games of the era with exploration, adventure, and many NPCs to interact with. First announced at Space World 1996 and later shown off in the following year's event, Miyamoto desired for Tezuka to direct the project, which, due to the mangaka's preoccupation with other projects, caused the game to be quietly cancelled, along with issues with the 64's hardware. The only remnants are a single 15-second video clip and various screenshots. Jack and the Beanstalk is a game intended for the 64DD, which was based on the fairy tale of the same name. First announced in 1995, the game was being developed on the second floor of Nintendo's Conda building, with a team of 10 employees presumably called Jack and Beans, led by Yoichi Yamamoto, a construction designer. Strangely enough, the panel of Satoru Iwata, Koichi Nakamura, Shigesato Itoi, and Shigeru Miyamoto himself chose multiple non-game developers to work on the project. It is unclear why this approach was used, though it makes the reasons for the game's cancellation all the clearer. The game was listed under Simulation in unreleased 64 listings, and many features from the game were later used for Pokemon Snap and the aforementioned Earthbound 64, such as the use of the in-game clock to grow seeds. The 3-day timer from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is speculated to have originated from the code of Jack and the Beanstalk, though this remains unsubstantiated. There are no screenshots or videos of the game at all. By far the most mysterious item on our list, DT64, known by its subtitle Blood Masters, was supposed to be a card-collecting RPG and was first shown off in a non-playable state at Space World 1999, with only a logo and text along with a Game Boy link cable, which would be used in-game to not only use the Game Boy as a controller, but also check card statistics and share data between the 64DD and a possible Game Boy version, which would also allow for story progression and further card gathering. The game would also use the 64DD's RadNet network to allow players to trade cards to complete their collections. The game was swiftly and quietly cancelled, and outside of a mention of a controller with a brain in a Japanese magazine and the aforementioned logo, it is unlikely anything will come of it. Metal Slater Glory is a game for the Famicom released in 1991. A sci-fi visual novel with mecha influence, the game is highly sought after due to its rarity and cult classic status. This inspired Nintendo and HAL Laboratory to make another game in the series, this time for the 64DD. The team wanted to use many of the features of the 64DD, such as rewritable discs and the internal clock, to make a sequel or prequel, it was never specified which, about secondary NPC Kisaragi Yayoi, though they had also had plans for a new protagonist named Uzuki. Due to the 64DD's many delays, the game was cancelled, and the devs decided to make a remake of the original instead, releasing Metal Slater Glory Director's Cut in 2000 as the last game for the Famicom ever, again only in Japan. Project Cairo is an untitled fantasy RPG to be developed by Team Graveyard for the 64DD based on a major comic license at the time, though which one it was is unknown. Mark Burke, the former vice president of acquisitions at Graveyard, said that the art for the game would be on par with, if not better than, the recently released Final Fantasy VII. Set to release in 1999, Graveyard were in talks with an anonymous British writer for a collaboration, though the game never left the planning stages. What was clear to the developers is that the PlayStation was a much better console, being cheaper, more popular, and more powerful than the failing 64 at the time, and didn't like how the 64DD's prospects were looking. It is speculated that many of Project Cairo's features were used for the team's next game, Shadow Madness, which was released in 1999, though this is unconfirmed. Shadow Madness performed poorly, and Graveyard closed. Nothing of the game was ever made, and thus nothing playable can be found of it. At best, maybe some concept art or something. Gendai Daisen Ryaku Ultimate War is a turn-based strategy game in the Daisen Ryaku series developed for the 64DD by Sega, with gameplay involving the movement of troops on a two-dimensional map before zooming in and engaging in the firefight with the weapons available in a cutscene. The game would have used the 64DD's RadNet network to support 4-player multiplayer. The game was moved to cartridge after several delays of it and the 64DD, which led to many problems, such as the removal of the multiplayer mode before the game was cancelled. There are many titles intended for the 64DD that we don't have much info about, so I figured I'd dump them all in here right before the one found game we have. In 1997, Nintendo acquired the rights to publish the original Diablo from Blizzard Entertainment in Japan, and it was planned to end up on the 64DD, likely being a port of the PC version like StarCraft was for the original 64. This port of Diablo is likely to never be released due to the failure of the 64DD. Mario Paint 64 was intended as a sequel to Mario Paint, first announced in a 1997 issue of Dengeki Nintendo 64, though nothing was ever revealed about the game, and the differences between it and Mario Artist Paint Studio remain up in the air. Then Zaimon 3D is a shoot-'em-up created by Athena and released in 1998 only in Japan, notable for its extensive level editor, including the ability to make custom stage bosses and give levels custom soundtracks. A 64DD add-on was planned for the game but never released. The add-on's existence was confirmed by certain statements in the level editor referencing this unused add-on. There was going to be a collection of NES/Famicom games for the 64DD, though it was never released. No plans for a second volume existed, and it's unknown what games would have been in the collection. Cubivore: Survival of the Fittest is an action-adventure game released in Japan for the Nintendo GameCube on February 21st, 2002. Originally, however, the game was to be released for the 64DD, first being shown off already on a cartridge at Space World 2000. The goal of the game is to evolve and grow stronger, eventually reaching the top of the food chain, and is notable for its heavily stylized graphics. Later on, however, it was moved to the then unknown Project Dolphin, where it would later see its release. Simcopter 64 is a remake of the original Simcopter released for the PC in 1996 by Maxis, intended for the 64DD, though the project was abandoned by Maxis after multiple delays shook their faith in the console. Oriental Blue is an entry in the Far East Forbidden RPG series intended for the 64DD. Due to delays and the failure of the 64DD, it was scrapped and reworked into Oriental Blue Ao no Tengai, which was released on the Game Boy Advance in 2003. Yep, they somehow found one of these, and it's one of the first big lost media finds. Super Mario Disc version, also known as Super Mario 64DD, was a planned port of Super Mario 64 for the 64DD, set to release in 1999 as a 64DD launch title. The game was going to be an enhanced port of the original, with some saying that Luigi would have been a playable character. There was, at the time, no footage to prove this, and speculation of Super Mario 64DD being the mythical Super Mario 64 2 began circulating, before being quickly debunked through Space World 1996's showcase of the game, which reinforced the theory of it being an enhanced port. Cut content found in the 2021 Nintendo Giga Leak indicated multiplayer functionality was at one point planned, though never implemented. Believed to instead be a tech demo, the suspicions of this were confirmed in June 2014, when a French collector found a copy of it at a secondhand game store in Japan. The only real differences between the original and the port were better textures, different music in Peach's castle, longer loading times, and some bugs involving the Wiggler boss fight in Tiny Huge Island. The ROM was dumped online and permanently lives at 64dd.org for people to download and play. Thanks for watching this video. Are there any other pieces of lost media you'd like to see me talk about? Let me know. Anyway, I need to push my talking vegetable on a swing set, so I'll see you next time. Goodbye.